by saying thank you for tuning in and enjoying it. You have a lot of live streams you can probably choose from, and we're so grateful that you're here. Even as we get started this morning, I might encourage you to just, share out this stream, especially if you're on Facebook or YouTube. Super simple, just hit the share button. Maybe invite a coworker, a family member, say, hey, will you worship with us this morning? Will you tune in with us? It would be fantastic. Next to that, I just encourage you wherever you are, press in, worship Him, do whatever you can to lift your voices to Him. I pray that the presence of God would just come and be so real and so evident wherever you are, whether it's in your house, your car, maybe you're sitting by the lake, I don't know. But I pray that God would just be so real to where you are, and that this worship would be something that we would not just be singing songs, but we'd be singing and glorifying Him, that He would be doing deep change in us, that we would never be the same, because He is a faithful God. Amen? Amen. Here we go. Sing, I have heard. And I have heard a sound coming on the wind, changing hearts and minds, healing brokenness. I feel a generation breaking through despair. I hear a generation full paid. He has paid the highest price. He has proven his great love for us. We will praise him with our lives and proclaim our love for him. Sing that again. He is paid. He has paid the highest price. He has proven his great love for us. We'll praise him with our lives and proclaim our love for him. Whoa. And proclaim, come on, let's proclaim our love for him. Sing that again, and proclaim. And proclaim our love for him. And proclaim our love for him. Oh, we love you, yeah. And proclaim our love for him. Oh, lift your voice, proclaim it out loud. Oh, yeah. And proclaim our love for him. We love you, Lord. And proclaim our love for him. Sing and proclaim our love for you. Last time. And proclaim our love for him.
Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper. When in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You died on Jesus, you're walking.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
Hello, and welcome to the Urban Refuge Church.
We're some of the youth group band, and we're doing announcements today because Katie didn't want to. If you're new to the UR, let us know you're here by texting Welcome UR to this number. You can go to our website, www.theurbanrefuge.com, to sign up for emails, and you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you for tuning in today, and we miss you.
Bye!
Bye.
The word peace is common in most languages. People can talk about peace treaties or times of peace. It means the absence of war. And in the Bible, the word peace can refer to the absence of conflict, but it also points to the presence of something better in its place. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for peace is shalom. And in the New Testament, the Greek word is eirene. The most basic meaning of shalom is complete or whole. The word can refer to a stone that has a perfect, whole shape with no cracks. It can also refer to a completed stone wall that has no gaps and no missing bricks. Shalom refers to something that's complex with lots of pieces that's in a state of completeness, wholeness. It's like Job, who says his tents are in a state of shalom because he counted his flock and no animals are missing. This is why shalom can refer to a person's well-being. Like when David visited his brothers on the battlefield, he asked about their shalom. The core idea is that life is complex, full of moving parts and relationships and situations, and when any of these is out of alignment or missing, your shalom breaks down. Life is no longer whole, it needs to be restored. In fact, that's the basic meaning of shalom when you use it as a verb. To bring shalom literally means to make complete or restore. So Solomon brings shalom to the unfinished temple when he completes it. Or if your animal accidentally damages your neighbor's field, you shalom them by giving them a complete repayment for their loss. You take what's missing and you restore it to wholeness. The same goes for human relationships. In the book of Proverbs, to reconcile and heal a broken relationship is to bring shalom. And when rival kingdoms make shalom in the Bible, it doesn't just mean they stop fighting, it also means they start working together for each other's benefit. This state of shalom is what Israel's kings were supposed to cultivate, and it rarely happened. So the prophet Isaiah, he looked forward to a future king, a prince of shalom, and his reign would bring shalom with no end, a time when God would make a covenant of shalom with his people and make right all wrongs and heal all that's been broken. This is why Jesus' birth in the New Testament was announced as the arrival of eirene. Remember, that's the Greek word for peace. Jesus came to offer his peace to others, like when he said to his followers, "My peace I give to you all." The apostles claimed that Jesus made peace between messed up humans and God when he died and rose from the dead. The idea is that he restored to wholeness the broken relationship between humans and their creator. This is why the Apostle Paul can say Jesus himself is our eirene. He was the whole complete human that I am made to be but have failed to be. And now he gives me his life as a gift. And this means that Jesus' followers are now called to create peace. Paul instructed local churches to keep their unity through the bond of peace, which requires humility and patience and bearing with others in love. Becoming people of peace means participating in the life of Jesus, who reconciled all things in heaven and earth, restoring peace through his death and resurrection. So peace takes a lot of work, because it's not just the absence of conflict. True peace requires taking what's broken and restoring it to wholeness, whether it's in our lives, our relationships, or in our world. And that's the rich biblical concept of peace.
And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him, and a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house someone who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside, and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat.
Hi, good morning, church. I hope you're doing well. We're going to continue on with this series called The Hope, and we're looking at Jesus, who is truly the healer. And of course, we had Mr. Torrin King read from Mark 5:21 through 43. And as he read, I just kept thinking of the Envision Future statement that we've had for a number of years now, which is building compassion-filled urban churches with and for future generations. And I just couldn't help but think well, there's a bit of that with and for future generations as he read. So thank you, Torrin. Great job. Really appreciate it. We watched a Bible Project video as well, looking at the word peace, and I like that they expanded it beyond just peace like a settling, but a peace of completeness, of wholeness, of coming together, things joining together. And I think that truly applies to what we're going to be talking about this morning, but of course it applies in our city and our nation as well. And so I thought a bit about how I wanted to make a request to you all to join with me this week to be praying for peace for the city and for our nation, that there'd be a pulling together, a shalom. Of course, there's been so much hurt, so much pain, so much confusion. And as ambassadors of Christ, I thought, well, at least we can be committed as a body to be praying that that shalom that the video was talking about would happen. But again, I think that that idea is really applicable for this message today as well. And I think we'll see how two people are coming towards Jesus, and that Jesus brings that shalom that the video was going after. Some of you know Ted and Beverly Williams, who used to attend the Urban Refuge. They have moved on down south. They are living down south. I believe it's in Tennessee. And they created a ministry center where they built this cabin where pastors and different ministry leaders can go and get a bit of a respite. And I think that they meet with them and do some counseling. So they're doing really well. And we certainly miss them around here. But while they were here, Ted and I would get together every once in a while and we'd have conversations. And one time he looked at me and he said, "Chad, everyone is moving towards becoming Jobalized." And he was referring to the book of Job, where there's this character who loses everything in a really short amount of time. He loses his wealth, he loses his health, and he loses much of his family in this just like in the blink of an eye. That's probably what it felt like to him anyways. And so he loses all these things, and now he's having to ponder, who he is before God with nothing else. And he's come to this point of desperation and really trying to figure out meaning and all these different things. And Ted was just referring to the fact that everyone's moving to losing it all. And we're all going to come to this point of desperation. And we're going to, I would hope, fall at the feet of Jesus. Well, I would say that the characters today of who we're looking at have become Jobalized. They have kind of run out of options, and they're now presenting themselves to Jesus in need of help. And many of us, it takes us a long time to come to this point. So this morning I would like to make some observations with that. I'm just going to walk through what we heard and just point out some things that I've noticed over the years when looking at this passage. So it starts off with Jesus. He is coming back from the other side. He had been on the other side in the Decapolis region where he had healed this demon-possessed man. And I would imagine that the disciples thought this was a really bad idea, but Jesus was committed to doing it. Now, when he returns back kind of to his home turf, there are throngs of people. There's a large crowd. What's a large crowd? Let's just maybe put 1,000 people in our minds as we think about what a large crowd is. And this large crowd, I would say, all want something from Jesus. And they're all trying to, I would assume, get something from Jesus. But some people, 2 people in particular in this picture, they have the tenacity to get what they want. They're not going to allow the crowds to stop them from getting what they need. They're very persistent. And the first one is the synagogue ruler, and his name is Jairus. Now, the thing that you need to know about Jairus is his name. The book of Mark mentions a lot of things with disciples and things like that, but one thing that it doesn't mention often is names. And so when it mentions a name, you want to kind of take some time and think about what that means. And what the name means is he's awakened. Now, scholars over the years have wondered, what is he awoken to? And I think that we'll discover that as we go into the message, as we go further along. But I want to make just some special note that his name means awaken. So he goes to Jesus and he falls at his feet and he makes this request that his daughter is dying and she is at the point of death. Now, you just need to appreciate how desperate he is. He's in this situation where he can't mentally do anything else. He's probably exasperated everything. He's had the best physicians. He's had everything at his disposal come and try to heal his daughter. But now he's at the very end of his rope, and now he's presenting himself to Jesus saying, I need you to come to my house. And surprisingly, with all the needs around Jesus, Jesus says yes. And maybe just for a moment, Jairus begins to feel a bit of hope. Now, inside of the book of Mark, there's something that's called a Markan sandwich. And what that is that there's an outer story and an inner story. And the outer story, see it as like the bread, and the inner story is the meat or cheese, if you're a vegetarian. I don't know. But I'm just saying that there's something that we need to eat the whole sandwich together to fully appreciate what's going on. Now, the outer story begins with this synagogue ruler making this request. But all of a sudden, we have the story interrupted by this woman who has a discharge of blood. And she has been dealing with this discharge of blood for the last 12 years. And she too wants something from Jesus, but she's not going to make herself known. She wants to go forward, and she wants to have this healing in a bit of secrecy. She doesn't want to put anyone out, and she doesn't want to make herself known. And there's a reason really why she doesn't want to make herself known. It's because she is seen as ritually unclean, right? And so you have kind of this scene where Jairus has gone before him. Jesus is responding. The story gets interrupted by this woman with this issue of blood. But you need to appreciate that all the while, there's this large crowd that is around them. Now, this woman amongst this large crowd, she has this belief, and she goes, I'm at the end of my rope, much like Jairus, and she says, if I just touch the corner fringe of his robe, I'm going to be healed. Now, she believes that she's going to be healed because I believe that she's remembering or she has recalled a prophecy found in the book of Malachi 4:2, where it talks about the Son of Righteousness, there will be healing in his wings. So she goes forward just like, I've got nothing else but faith, and I'm going to believe because I've heard these reports, and I'm going to go forward and I'm going to do this. I'm going to touch. Now, something that I just need to quickly mention is that though Jairus is named, she is unnamed. She's just a woman that is just seen as a woman that is unclean. She just is this nameless person, and that's important when we think about how Jesus responds to her. So going back, she does that. She touches the fringe of his robe because in those biblical times, the robe, that tzitzit, those corner fringes, they were considered to be the rabbi's wings. And there's a lot. I've talked about this in the past. She goes forward, she touches, and all of a sudden, she's healed. She's healed. Amongst this crowd of people, she's healed. Now, Jesus, he says something, in some ways, I feel like it's a bit ridiculous, and I think the disciples think it's a bit ridiculous as well. He says, who touched me? It's ridiculous because there's this throng of people all around him, and the disciples, of course, they say, how do we know who touched you? There are all these people around. All sorts of people are touching you. But some people are gathering around him, not maybe really fully understanding who they are. They're not coming to him in faith. She has come to him in faith. And because of this, there is this healing. It's because of her faith. Jesus acknowledges, because of your faith, you've been healed. Now, what I need you to remember in this whole situation is that Jairus is in the background watching this happen, but he is in desperate need. And Jesus doesn't really go along with his plans with the sense of urgency to go and heal his daughter. He takes time to acknowledge who this woman is. Now, there's this line where it says that Jesus says, hey, I want to know who touches me. And of course, again, the disciples say, we don't know who that is. But finally, this woman that has been dealing with this issue comes forward and admits that it's her. Now, scholars over the years have looked at what does it mean that she tells him the whole truth? Is the whole truth her backstory, how she's suffered, how she's hurt? I tend to lean to think that that's what it's getting after. Now, if that's true, and if you're Jairus and you are in this desperate need, waiting is awful. Waiting is excruciating. And he's most likely wanting to just get Jesus moving, get him moving forward. But on the other hand, it's possible that he's being filled with hope. He's like, well, if he can do that with her, imagine what he could maybe do for my daughter. And so maybe there's a bit of a contrast going on. Maybe he's struggling with wanting to move forward, but maybe in the meantime, while he's watching this event happen, he begins being filled with hope. And as I think about Jairus, I really resonate with where he is, because I feel that we have been in this time of waiting. COVID just seems like we're in this perpetual waiting. I just want it to move forward. But we're waiting. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have hope. But at the same time, because there are all these events that are surrounding it, all these hurts, all these pain, the waiting in hope can be excruciating. And as I've just thought and pondered about his situation, I have a great deal of compassion. I can relate. On the other hand, some of you Maybe you have been suffering from something for the last 12 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And you're like, no, I need Jesus now. I'm at the end of my rope, and I've been at the end of my rope. And maybe you need to push through and just, maybe the crowd is just the crowd of your mind. And you need to push through that crowd, and you need to touch, believing that God wants to meet you there. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm not suggesting that it's just some kind of, presto kind of magic. And yet there's something in that both characters are in need to press through because of desperation. So Jesus looks at her, and then he does something that is, I think, really interesting. He changes her identity. He hears the whole truth, and then he says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Inside of faith, changing your identity can be one of the most difficult things as you go forward. But really, when you become a child of God, you place your faith in Jesus, you begin walking out your faith in the wilderness of life. You're no longer a person like her where she is seen as unclean. No, she's been restored, and in that restoration, Jesus gives her a new identity as daughter. And that is just a profound thing. Many of us live in an identity of our past, an identity of something that we used to be. I can do that. I know who I was. And sometimes I'm like, there it is. I'm just the same person. When in reality, I at times hear Jesus saying, no, Chad, you're my son, and I love you. I care for you. I know you make mistakes. I know that you screw up, but I love you, and I'm shaping you, and I'm molding you into the person that I want you to be. So identity is a big deal in this, and it's a big deal when thinking about what it is to have shalom, because the Lord is molding us into his shalom, in his completeness, which is, of course, found in him. But Jairus is waiting. So difficult to wait. And they're just maybe about to move on. While they're still speaking, the text says, this servant, this person comes to him, and they say, your daughter is dead. And I cannot even begin to imagine what is going on inside of the mind of Jairus. There is no hope now. She's dead. And Jesus is right there. He's hearing this as well. And he looks at Jairus and he says, hey, keep having faith. A better translation of this is don't stop believing. I mean, he goes totally journey on him. He's like, don't stop. Keep believing. Keep having hope. Church, we're going through all sorts of stuff. Keep having hope. Maybe you feel like things are dying or they're dead. No, it's not dead. We're moving towards life. It just has the appearance in the moment right now that the things are dead. Or at least at times that's what it feels like. And if you live into that belief too long, hope begins to dissipate. And I think that that's where Jairus really is in this moment, that hope has just drained right out of him. For a brief moment, he begins to feel like he has hope. And then all of a sudden he hears this news, and he's now having to wrestle through all of what that means. But Jesus says, no, don't stop. Don't stop having faith. You were doing so good. And church, if there's one thing that I want you to hear today is don't stop having faith. Keep believing that there is hope as we go forward. Because I tell you what, the hurt, the confusion, the chaos, it can just drain you of hope. But we know that we're not, the story's not finished yet. We know that this is not done. We're going towards something. We have to live in that. We need to keep believing. So Jairus, he does it. He goes, okay, I'm going to keep believing. I'm going to bring you to the house. And as they're walking towards the house, you can just imagine that that he gets closer and there's cries, and he hears the cries, he hears the mourning, he hears the wailing, and he's just trying to hold on to the thread of hope. And Jesus goes in and he says, she's not dead, she's just sleeping. And the text tells us that everyone begins to laugh. People start to laugh, and they're like, listen, we know dead when we see dead. She hasn't taken a breath for the last 20 minutes. She's gone. And they start to laugh because they're just like, this is ridiculous. Why would you say this to us? It's actually quite hurtful. And Jesus then looks at her and he says, little girl, rise. And then all of a sudden, the miraculous happens. And she rises from the dead. And then Jairus has to see that. And maybe in that name of he has awoken, he is awakened. That's what his name means. He awakens. Maybe he's living into his name in such a profound way that, wow, I am next to something profound. And maybe yet he can't even identify that it's the Messiah. Maybe he doesn't know that it's the Son of God, but his whole reality has radically just shifted. And when he just was at the point of no hope at all, now all he has is hope, because death has been conquered. And then Jesus says to the little girl, go get something to eat, to prove that, no, she's not just some ghost. She's really alive. And I love this. I love this because when I think about what it is to have hope, we don't believe that the story is over. And when we think about this story in particular, we realize that there's really just no commonality at all when thinking about these two characters. I mean, just think about it. Okay, look, just take this. Jairus, he has a name. She is nameless. Jairus is on the top of the social, economic, and religious spectrum. She's at the bottom of the food chain. He's a male, she's a female. He's a synagogue official. She's ritually unclean, excluded from the religious community. He has a family and a large household. She's been alone in isolation for a really, really long time because of her condition. He's most likely rich. She's impoverished because she spent all that she has on all these physicians and these just, things that she's just trying to just get healed. She's lost everything. But here's the thing. Both of them are in need of a Savior to save them. Both of them are needing Jesus. And both of them, in both of their statuses, fall at the feet of Jesus and they say, please help me. And you know what Jesus is able to do? He's able to bring that shalom, that completeness. Where death tries to rip us apart, he says, no, I am going to bring shalom. Where this woman has felt separated, he brings her back into wholeness. Both of them have the commonality of being in desperation, being Jobalized, being in need and falling at the feet of Jesus and saying, well, you're the only hope that I have. And in going towards that hope, they find hope and they find that shalom. It's really stunning. When I think about the Urban Refuge in general, I would say that's who we are as a church. We are a church where we are coming together from all different sorts of walks of life. And we hope to see that the nations come, because all of the world is looking for that hope, looking for that completion that Jesus provides. He provides it. And we can forget it as we go forward. And so as we think about that idea that we're all moving towards this hope together, we need to do something really important. We need to remember that there is no death where God commands. When Jesus says, no, the girl's not dead, she's not dead. And I've thought about just how profound that really is when you think about what the ultimate belief in Christianity, what it really is that we believe that he takes dead things and he brings them back to life. I mean, maybe you feel like your marriage is dying. Well, no, he takes dead things and he can bring it back to life when we put our faith and our hope in him. He brings that shalom. And my wife and I were walking yesterday, and we were having this conversation around creationism and how some people believe in the Big Bang, but they're believers, and you know, how do you wrestle through all that? And I said to Carol, I said, well, you know, what's really interesting is no matter where you're at, the one thing that we believe that is pretty unreal when you really break it down is that we believe that we turn into dust and then Jesus is able to put us back together. Now, if he's able to do that when we are dead, imagine how he's able to do that while we're still living. Because there are pieces inside of my soul at times that feel like they're just breaking apart. And so I'm trying to go in my desperation, in my Jobilized state, to say, Jesus, put me back together. Because I'm in need. I'm in need, and you are the hope. And Jesus ultimately, you know, he walks this out. He goes to the cross. He allows death to do its worst, believing that his Father has the power, the ability to bring him back to life. And this is the great story. He not only shows us the hope, he lives in the hope. And he says, no, I'm going to be king over death. There is hope. He's still on the throne, and he's still doing something, though we may feel like we're in a Jairus moment of waiting. God bless you, friends. Keep hanging on. Don't stop believing. Don't stop believing. Keep taking steps. The word is truly a lamp unto our feet. Allow it to show you the next steps and take steps going forward. Let me pray. Father, we thank you that you truly are the hope. We thank you that you're teaching us. We thank you that even if we're Jairus, or if we're the woman that now has a new identity as daughter of the King, that we can be like them, and we can fall at your feet, and we can find healing, we can find hope, we can find restoration, and we can take the next step, and you will bring shalom into our lives. You will bring completeness to the body. You will heal the inner wounds. You may heal the outer wounds. Lord, help us to be Holy Spirit saturated in such a way that we experience a transformation in our life that goes beyond what any physician could ever do. Lord, help me in my unbelief. I so want to believe. But you know, Father, that at times I really struggle in believing. So in this prayer, in the desire to have true shalom, Lord, help me in my unbelief. Help my friends in their unbelief. Help us to go forward, trusting you. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much, friends. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. God bless you.
girl.